Okay, so Judge Bev isn't bringing anybody back into court until July 22nd. And even though there are some motions and some affidavits floating around, the different things that the different jurors are saying, I understand there's some behind the scenes stuff happening right now, and I'll cover that in other videos. But in the meantime, I have just been kind of keeping my eye on the town of Canton and just kind of thinking to myself, this can't be normal. The things that happen in this town they couldn't possibly happen everywhere. And that brings me back to a discussion about the Albert brothers. Now, I said all the way back to one of the earliest videos that I made that I try to be fair and try and look at things when necessary from multiple sides. So let's get real about families for a minute, because we know no family is perfect. And if you, in your family, or you know of friends or whatever who have siblings, so if there are 3, 4, 5 kids in a family, statistically, there is a probability that one of them might turn out to be a little bit of a hellraiser, right? You're going to have the troublemaker kid. Sometimes it's the youngest one who's a little rebellious, that bad seed, the proverbial black sheep, if you will. And the hope is that they'll outgrow it, right? They'll have some craziness in their teenage years or maybe into college, but then they'll outgrow it. And hopefully you don't have someone in the family that is later in life experiencing significant legal battles. They have lawyers on speed dial. Maybe they're battling issues with drugs or alcohol. You know, it's one thing to be a rebellious teenager. It's entirely different to be the guy who can't come to Thanksgiving dinner because you're in jail. Now, I'm trying to be as fair as possible because I also have siblings. We are a family of 4. Now we're down to 3. But honestly, in our entire adult life, my siblings and I were all in our 50s. My brother just turned 60, and never once have any of us had to be bailed out of jail. Never once have we gotten DUIs. Never once have we had to be represented in court by attorneys. None of us have mugshots on file. None of us have ever been involved in vehicular incidents. We've never been engaged in activity that's caused physical harm to other people. And certainly none of us have ever been witness to or a party to a case where people have died. And we're not high holy rollers, believe me. We've all had our fair share of fun. But what I'm saying is that there's a lot of shit you outgrow. And as a responsible adult, you shouldn't be somebody who seems to constantly be tied into these activities. Which brings me back to the Alberts. Statistically, when you have a family of multiple kids, usually there's only one that acts up. How do you think Mr. and Mrs. Albert, if they were alive today, how they would feel about 4 of their sons growing up to become vile pieces of shit? And for the record, I'm going to talk about 4 of the Albert brothers. I understand there may be a 5th one that we never talk about. I think his name is Keith. He doesn't seem to be in the equation, but there are 4 that have all had some pretty significant connections to law-breaking activities. And so I want to make sure that I take some time. It's probably going to be a couple videos, but I want to take some time to dive into all of their backgrounds. The reason this is important is because a lot of people who are still on the side that think that Karen Read may have killed John O'Keefe, a lot of the reason some of them think that, not all, but some of them think that, is because the alternative is an unreasonable proposition to them. If Karen didn't do it, that means there's a conspiracy amongst all these people, many of them cops and city leaders and people who were all intertwined in keeping a bunch of evidence hidden and faked and whatever. We are inherently raised to believe that the police are the good guys, that they're supposed to protect and serve. So maybe it's easier to believe this drunken girlfriend did it than all of these people who are supposed to be upstanding citizens. But when we're talking about the Albert family, they are far from fucking upstanding. That's why I needed to make these videos. The first one I'm going to talk about is Tim Albert. In 2009, he was involved in a vehicular incident. And so what we understand is that Tim was driving his car and he let me rephrase that. He slammed into a stopped vehicle. It wasn't parked. It was a stopped vehicle at, say, a stoplight. Now, again, I'm going to try and be fair. We've all been in those situations. You're driving down the freeway, something happens, you're looking around, you're distracted for a minute, and you look up and all the traffic in front of you is at a dead stop. And you slam on your brakes and you do everything you can not to bump into the person in front of you. Well, Tim didn't seem to have that reaction, right? I don't know if he wasn't looking when he hit, but there doesn't seem to be any conversation about how hard he tried to evade the incident. And then he ran. So This was a hit and run. And again, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, but I know that if I hit somebody and it was an accident, I would really have no reason to run because, oops, I fucked up. I was paying attention. I was changing radio stations or whatever, and I hit the car in front of me. Call the police. Let's own up to this. You might run if there's some other reason you need to run. Hypothetically, I do not know any of this to be true, but could there have been other reasons? Was he drinking? Was he high? Did he have something like maybe the vehicle wasn't registered? Maybe his license is expired. Maybe he's had previous run-ins. Maybe he's out on bail. Like, you just don't know. But I would feel like a hit and run comes from a place where you fear bigger issues. It's not because it's a simple traffic accident. You hit and run because there's something else wrong. Tim's car was so heavily damaged that it was leaking some sort of fluid. And so it was easy for the police to follow the breadcrumbs all the way back to 34 Fairview, which is where he lived at the time. It's the Alberts family home. That's where the parents raised them. He still lived there with all of his brothers. That's where he went. Canton police officers, Lank and Good, and you've probably heard Lank's name before because he was one of the officers involved in the Karen Reed investigation, and he is known to be a friendly to the Alberts, to the Albert family. He followed the fluid, made his way over to the Albert home, had some conversations with Tim. According to his testimony, he was asked about this on the stand, Officer Lank was, and he said he did not ask Tim if he'd been drinking. He did no field sobriety test. He did no breathalyzer. He did nothing to verify whether or not Tim was impaired at the time of the accident. Officer, who is a family friend, didn't deem Tim at any point to be impaired. He just thought it was a mistake that he ran from. He was just given a misdemeanor traffic offense. He was given diversion, that one of those diversion classes. Record has been wiped clean. Now, Officer Lank is not one of the Albert family members, but he might as well be because his name comes up every single time as the officer that they call or the officer who magically shows up to be the first investigator on the scene every damn time something involves an Albert. And there's far more of that in the stories to come because I still got to cover 3 more brothers. So please come back for more videos.